this week's episode of I Want to Know Your Story. This week is a recap of the first 10 episodes and a reminder as to why we're doing the show. The goal of I Want to Know Your Story is to build a world with less judgments, more empathy and understanding, one story at a time. I'll start with episode 1, Errol's story. I mentioned to you that I met Errol when he was 70 years old. He's now 75, as he mentioned in his video. I used to tutor him how to read. We worked on his spelling, his comprehension, his sounding out of words. Errol taught me a lot. He taught me empathy for sure. He taught me patience and understanding about the aging process. Sometimes Errol would have trouble remembering the previous lesson when we met the next time, whether it was 2 days later or a week later. I had to learn that that was his process, and I was just here to help. Errol was very excited at our event a couple weeks ago to meet the people that had watched his story. He's up over 600 views. He can't even believe it, and he's so grateful, and he hopes that his story just helps one person. Episode 2 was Allie's story. I met Allie because I know her father and her stepmom. Allie was a 2-time kidney transplant recipient. Her energy and spunk and positive attitude were amazing to me. At such a young age, to have had such intense medical condition and require 2 kidney transplants by her age, I don't know if I would have been able to handle it. She's a brave, amazing young woman. Through talking to her, I learned something. I didn't realize that when you have a kidney transplant, it doesn't remove kidneys. It just adds kidneys, as long as they're not harmful to the body. She mentions that in her story, which I found fascinating. She's back to work after her last transplant and doing great. She is extremely grateful to those who have watched her story. Episode 3 was Steve. Steve's story was extremely touching to me. It reminded me that there is always something behind where people are at the moment you meet them. I've known Steve for a couple of years, just through being in and out of the office that he works in, as his boss was a client of mine. And we always talked travel, friendly stories. I didn't really dig too deep. I didn't think it was my place. But when he was over the moon to share his story on the show, I didn't waste any time getting it. And he could not believe that he even took that step to share with everyone. It was a big step for him, and he really appreciates everyone's comments. There's a path that led Steve to being that receptionist at that doctor's office. So next time you see someone in a position that you may not think fits them, maybe there's a reason why that we don't know. So let's try and understand. Episode 4, Nathan's story. I met Nathan at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday morning at the gym. I was curious as to why a kid his age would be at the gym before going to school, by himself, not with like a group of classmates. Maybe he was being bullied. Maybe his dad was there trying to help him build his confidence. Nope. He was just there trying to build muscle and strength and get better at his favorite sport, golf. He talks about his ambitions of playing for Stanford, as well as his other hobbies, which include robotics competitions and computer coding. Check out his episode. It's pretty interesting. Now on to episode 5, Jonathan's story. Jonathan and I share a love for Halloween, because dressing up as someone else once a year is always fun. Jonathan's episode was really interesting to me. I found it kind of sad that at the age of 5, he felt he had to repurpose his thoughts and his feelings to something that was more acceptable, and he was convinced he couldn't feel a certain way or be who he was. Well, Jonathan was married in October to the love of his life, and they're living that happily ever after, so I'm super happy for him. Now, on to episode 6. That's Natalies' story. I know Natalie because of her mom, as I mentioned before. Sitting down with Natalie that day was really eye-opening. I was amazed that a girl her age was so focused and driven. She started a business at age 6. I'm pretty sure at age 6 I was still playing with my Legos. I was definitely not focused on starting a business, let alone donating a portion of my proceeds to charity. How she came to find the charity was amazing. She's really focused on helping other kids in other places that are less fortunate than her. I found that completely impressive, that a 6-year-old would be thinking that much about other people. If you haven't watched Natalie's story, I highly recommend checking it out. Now, on to our next episode, episode 7, Natashas Story. Again, I met Natasha in a coffee shop. We were complete strangers. She was sitting in the corner with her blonde hair, and she had a bright blue shirt on, and her mascara matched her shirt. She had a multicolored purse, and she was really into what she was doing on her phone. But I felt like I needed to meet her and hear her story. Boy, did she have one. She's had her ups and downs out here in LA. And getting to meet her kids was extremely amazing. Amir and AJ are smart, and I can't even describe how funny they are. But getting to listen to their story and where they've been and how much they love their mom was really cool to see. Now, on to episode 8. That's Dylan's story. I met Dylan because he was with his friend, as I mentioned when we were filming another episode, and Dylan wanted to share his story. I didn't know what he was going to share. I didn't know anything about Dylan. And we sat down and he talked about his mistake, getting in the car when he had been drinking. Luckily, he didn't hit anyone else. He had just hit a tree. But the ramifications for that and the injuries he sustained and the scar that left on his lip will last him a lifetime, and he'll always remember that choice. His story really hit me hard. I left after we filmed and I just burst into tears. Sitting down with someone that young that seemed to be an all-around good guy with good morals and a real love for other people, and to hear how his accident affected him really affected me. So I am sure that through his telling of his story to other people and sharing in the presentations he's been giving has really been helping him heal. Now, on to episode 9, Jerry's story. Jerry and I, again, like I said, met playing cards. I was completely annoyed by him in the beginning and frustrated with his lack of etiquette at a poker table. He would scream when he won. He would scream when he lost. He talked constantly. Just put people on like what we refer to as tilt. At a break, I had to just calm down and say, you know what? You don't know this guy. You don't know what happened to him before he came here. So I went up and asked him if we could sit down one day and talk. It was nice to share Jerry's story, and I think he enjoyed it as well. He sent me an email thanking me for being able to sit down, and thanked me also for getting past his initial impression and wanting to understand his story. If you haven't seen it, it's a pretty good one. Last but not least, episode 10, the one and only Ruth Hall. Ruth, like I mentioned, I had a chance to have mentor me in poker strategy on 2 different occasions. We also sat on the board of the Women's Poker Association together. Listening to her stories about battling breast cancer on more than one occasion, her brain tumor that she deals with now that causes her to have vertigo and impede her travel in what she wants to do in her life. She's a strong woman. And like she says at the end of her interview, she's a survivor. I'm humbled by all of these stories that have been shared with me and the many more that we're going to air. I invite you to tune in to the next 10 episodes as well. Remember, being human isn't one size fits all. The only way we can treat each other better is to try to understand each other.